Welcome to Air Emergencies Simply Explained. In today's video we will be looking into the worst air disaster in history, the Tenerife Airport Disaster. March 27, 1977. Two Boeing 747s, Pan American World Airways Flight 1736, and KLM Flight 4805 are en route to Gran Canaria in the Canary Islands. There are 380 passengers and 16 crew members on the Pan AM flight, while there are 234 passengers and 14 crew members on the KLM flight. Pan AM Flight 1736 started its journey in Los Angeles with a stopover in New York City, while KLM Flight 4805 started its journey in Amsterdam. At 1:15 p.m., a bomb explodes at Gran Canaria Airport. This forces many planes including Flight 1736 and Flight 4805 to divert to Los Rodeos Airport in the island of Tenerife. Los Rodeos Airport is only a small airport with one runway, one main taxiway and four minor taxiways connecting the runway and main taxiway. The airport is also not designed to accommodate the large 747s. Flight 4805 arrives first and parks on the main taxiway area closest to the runway 12 threshold. Flight 1736 arrives next and parks behind the KLM aircraft. As the diverted flights await the reopening of Gran Canaria Airport, the KLM captain, Jacob Velthuizen van Zanten, requests to the tower to have his passengers transferred over to the terminal for their comfort. The Pan AM pilots also make the same request but is denied as the terminal would already be full. A few hours into the diversion, rain starts pouring. The KLM pilots decide to make their time waiting useful and order for the aircraft to be refueled. This is so that they would not have to waste time refueling at Gran Canaria. However, as Flight 4805 is in the middle of refueling, Gran Canaria Airport reopens. Captain Van Zanten orders all of his passengers on board. The Pan AM pilots ask the KLM pilots how much time it would take for them to refuel. The KLM pilots reply that it would take approximately half an hour. Because the KLM flight is parked on the main taxiway, the Pan AM flight cannot move around them. Flight 4805 eventually finishes refueling, but the search for a Dutch family that failed to board the aircraft delays the flight further. At around 5 p.m., Flight 4805 reports that they are ready to taxi. The tower controller instructs the pilots to taxi down the entire length of the runway before making a 180-degree turn to line up with runway 30. The tower controller then instructs Flight 1736 to taxi down the runway and exit through taxiway Charlie 3. Fog has now covered the airport and both aircraft are invisible to the tower controller. During its taxi down the runway, Flight 1736 misses the Charlie 3 exit. Around the same time, Flight 4805 has finished backtracking and is lined up on runway 30. Captain Van Zanten immediately throttles the aircraft to full power. But he is stopped by his first officer, Klaus Mers, as they have yet to receive their takeoff clearance. The KLM pilots request their takeoff clearance. The tower controller gives the pilots instructions on what to do once they are cleared for takeoff. However, he does not yet clear Flight 4805 for takeoff. First Officer Mers reads back the clearance but states we are now at takeoff. The tower controller replies okay. Stand by for takeoff, I will call you. At the same time, the Pan AM First Officer, Robert Bragg, radios and we're still taxiing down the runway. Because the Pan AM pilots transmitted at the same time the tower controller instructed the KLM pilots to stand by, the tower controller's message was blocked and only the OK part was heard by the KLM crew as a response to their "we are now at takeoff" statement. The tower controller then responded to the Pan Am's report that they are still on the runway with Pan AM 1736 report runway cleared, to which First Officer Bragg reports that they will report when they are clear. In the KLM cockpit, the flight engineer, Willem Schroeder, worriedly asks if the Pan Am is clear of the runway. Captain Van Zanten replies that it is. Flight 1736 nears taxiway Charlie 4. The Pan AM pilots hope to finally get clear of the runway. Seconds later, the Pan AM pilots spot the KLM 747 speeding towards them. The Pan AM captain, Victor Grubbs, immediately turns the aircraft to the left in an attempt to get off the runway. The KLM pilots also spot the Pan AM 747 on the runway. Captain Van Zanten immediately pulls the nose up and attempt to take off. The sudden pull of the nose causes the KLM 747's tail to scrape down the runway. Captain Van Zanten manages to get airborne but it is not enough. KLM Flight 4805 collides with Pan AM Flight 1736. All 248 people on board Flight 4805 are killed. 335 people on board Flight 1736 are also killed. 61 people survive the collision with various injuries. Among the survivors are Flight 173SIXS-3 pilots Captain Victor Grubbs, First Officer Robert Bragg, and Flight Engineer George Warnes. In all, 583 people die in the disaster, making the collision the deadliest air disaster in history. Investigators discovered that the reason Flight 1736 did not exit through taxiway Charlie 3 was because it would have required the pilots to make two sharp 148-degree turns that the Boeing 747 simply could not make. Charlie 4 on the other hand would have only required the pilots to make two 45-degree turns. The KLM pilots on the other hand likely confused the controllers after takeoff clearance with their actual takeoff clearance. This caused them to perform an unauthorized takeoff. Captain Van Zanten was KLM's chief pilot. However, he was mostly assigned to the airline's flight simulator. Flight 4805 was his first flight in 3 months. As flight simulators do not have air traffic controllers, it was possible that Captain Van Zanten conducted the unauthorized takeoff as he was used to being the one giving the takeoff clearance. In response to the accident, airlines all over the world implemented crew resource management. CRM allows for better coordination between pilots. Also, controllers now use the term after departure when giving instructions to aircraft that are not cleared for takeoff. That is it for today's video. I hope you learned something new. Please consider subscribing and hitting that notification button for more Simply Explained air emergency videos.